Willow Hollow, Montana Territory. Autumn, 1884. The valley lay quiet beneath a thin veil of frost, the pines whispering against a bruised sky. Smoke rose from only one chimney on the far ridge, Elias Ward's cabin, where silence had become a kind of prayer. He moved through his days like a ghost that refused to haunt, mending traps, patching a coat, feeding the fire without purpose. His rifle leaned by the hearth, oiled but unused. The world beyond his door no longer asked anything of him, and that suited him fine. Sometimes at dusk he'd ride the ridge and watch the river glint below, a ribbon of cold silver. The wind carried faint echoes, laughter from the town, a dog's bark, fragments of a life he no longer claimed. He remembered another home, another woman's voice soft as cotton and the child that never drew breath. That memory came not as image but ache, dull and steady as the limp in his leg. That evening the sky bruised purple before the snow, and the cold smelled of iron and pine. He was skinning a hare by lantern light when his horse stirred, a nervous sound, the kind it made when something living approached. Then came the sound no man expects in wilderness, a cry too thin for a coyote, too desperate for the wind. He froze, knife halfway through the pelt. Another sound followed, went a whimper, choked and human. Elias stepped out into the night, breath fogging the air. The cry came again, closer this time, and through the snow, beneath the trembling lantern light, he saw her, a bundled infant on the ground beside a burned wagon, the world around her silent as a prayer unfinished. He took one step toward her, then another. The silence broke. Elias knelt beside the infant, the snow already gathering along the folds of the blanket. Her lips were blue, her breath shallow and quick like a bird's trapped beneath cloth. He looked around, the wagon still smoldered, the ground marked by hooves and boots. No survivors, no sound but the wind threading through the wreckage. He pressed two fingers to the child's neck, a pulse fragile as a match flame. He gathered her into his coat against the warmth of his chest, and she whimpered once before falling quiet. The weight of her was nothing, barely more than the fur he wore, yet it pulled something deep inside him loose. The ride back to his cabin was slow. The wind cut his face raw, and each hoofbeat sounded like time running out. He talked to her under his breath, nonsense, half-remembered hymns, words he hadn't used in years. When he crossed the frozen creek, her tiny hand moved against his chest, and he almost wept from the shock of it. Inside, the fire was low. He set her near it, rubbed her hands between his palms until color returned. She opened her eyes once, and gray as the storm outside, then drifted back into sleep. He poured a bit of milk from the tin, warmed it, fed her drop by drop from a rag. When the fire crackled higher, he looked at her, truly looked, and saw not just a child, but a mercy he had no right to touch. Still, he wrapped her tighter, built the fire higher, and whispered to the empty room, "You'll make it through the night." Outside, the wind howled over the ridge, erasing every track that had led her there. By morning, the world outside was white and still, a silence so deep it felt like the land was holding its breath. Elias hadn't slept. He'd sat by the fire, half dreaming, half listening to the soft rasp of the child's breathing. Each sound tethered him closer to something he'd thought long dead inside. When the sun finally touched the ridge, he knew what he had to do. His cabin held nothing fit for an infant. No milk, no blankets, no hands gentler than his own. He wrapped her tight, mounted his horse, and rode toward town. The trail wound through drifts that reached the stirrups. His body ached with every movement, but he kept her close beneath his coat, feeling the faint rhythm of her life against his heart. When he reached Willow Hollow, smoke curled from chimneys and the sound of a blacksmith's hammer echoed down the frozen street. Folks stopped to watch as he passed, a solitary man with a bundle in his arms. He rode to the edge of town where a small cabin leaned beneath an old willow. Its windows glowed dim behind frosted glass. Elias dismounted and stood a long moment before the door. Inside, a woman's shape moved, bent over a table, mending something by lamplight. The air carried the faint scent of bread and lavender soap. His hand trembled once before he knocked. The door opened to a pale face framed in loose brown hair. Her eyes, wary, kind, and tired, fell first on the bundle in his arms. "She's starving," he said, voice rough, "and I can't keep her alive." For a moment she said nothing. Then without a word, Clara Hensley stepped aside and held out her arms. Elias hesitated, then let the child go. Clara took the infant without question, her hands steady though her breath trembled. She set the child near the stove, unwrapped the stiff blankets, and began warming milk in a tin cup. Elias stood by the door, snow melting from his coat, unsure whether to speak or leave. The room smelled of sage and old fabric, the scent of someone who had built a life from mending what others had torn. The baby whimpered, and Clara hushed her softly, pressing a damp cloth to her lips. "She's half frozen," she murmured. "But she wants to live." Her voice was quiet, worn smooth by years of silence. Elias found himself watching her hands more than her face, the way they trembled when the baby stirred, then steadied again when the child finally drank. The sound of it, tiny, desperate gulps, filled the room like a hymn. Clara exhaled almost in disbelief, then lifted her eyes to him. "Where did you find her?" He looked away. "Wagon burned out by the ridge. No one left alive." She nodded once as if she already knew. "You think she's white?" Elias hesitated. "I don't know." That truth hung between them, sharp as the cold outside. Clara looked down at the child, her face unreadable. "Does it matter?" For a long time he didn't answer. The fire popped, wind scraped the windows, and somewhere in that sound the ghosts of both their pasts stirred. When he finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "It shouldn't." Clara wrapped the infant closer, the way a mother might shield her own heart. "Then let's keep her warm tonight," she said. "Morning can ask its questions." Outside, the storm deepened, not cruel, just endless, like forgiveness waiting to be earned. By the third day, the storm broke, leaving a stillness that felt uneasy, too clean, too bright. Snow gleamed along the rooftops, and smoke rose in straight, watchful columns. Word had already reached town about the burned wagon. When Elias stepped outside Clara's cabin that morning, he saw Sheriff Vale's horse tied by the fence. Inside, the child slept by the fire, her cheeks finally full with color. Clara moved quietly, as if afraid her breath alone might wake trouble. Vale sat at her table, hat in hand, eyes sharp despite his calm tone. "You were seen riding from the ridge that night," he said. "Now there's a dead family and a live child. Folks are asking questions." Elias met his gaze. "Then let them ask." Vale studied him, then the bundle by the hearth. "That baby's got dark hair, skin tone like she might not be from town folk." "You think she's—" "Don't," Clara cut in, voice steady but low. "She's a child." "Nothing else." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "There's law about who can raise who, Clara, and the Army's still touchy about raids." Elias's hand flexed near his side, the ghost of a soldier's reflex. He'd seen laws like that written in blood, not ink. "I found her alive. That's all that matters." Vale stood, pulling his gloves on slow. "If she's tied to the Comanche, they'll come looking. And when they do, I can't protect you." He left without waiting for a reply. Elias closed the door, leaned against it, eyes hollow. Clara didn't look up. She just held the sleeping child closer, as if the warmth alone could shield them from the world. Outside, the sun bled over the snow, too bright, too accusing, like truth coming whether they wanted it or not. That night, the wind rose again, but it carried no snow, only dust and unease. Elias sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, the fire's glow flickering across the scars on his hands. Clara moved behind him, silent, her shadow stretching long across the wall. The baby slept in a cradle Elias had built from a crate and a quilt, her breathing steady, unbothered by the storm brewing beyond the door. Then came the sound, faint, rhythmic. Hooves, slow and deliberate, moving through frozen ground. Elias's hand tightened on the rifle, eyes narrowing toward the dark. 3 riders emerged through the haze, shapes more than men, wrapped in blankets and silence. They stopped at the edge of the yard. One dismounted, raising a hand in peace. The others held back. Clara stepped beside Elias, her voice barely breath. "They've come for her." He didn't move. The fire cracked once, loud as a gunshot. The man outside spoke, not in English, but soft, solemn words that carried like prayer. Elias caught enough to understand. The baby's name, the father's death, the mother's plea to keep the child alive among good hands. Elias lowered the rifle slowly. His throat tightened. The man nodded once, eyes meeting his through the frost, then placed a carved charm on the snow, a token of farewell, not claim. They turned their horses and vanished into the white horizon without another sound. Clara exhaled, long and shaking. Elias knelt, picked up the charm, a small bird, wings spread. He set it by the cradle and touched the baby's hand. The wind fell quiet, leaving only the fire's hum. No victory, no loss, just the stillness that comes when mercy wins. Morning came soft, the kind that slips in quietly after too much sorrow. Smoke rose straight into a pale sky, and the frost on the windows caught the light like stained glass. Clara stirred the fire, her movements slow, unhurried now. Elias sat nearby, whittling wood to calm his hands, though his thoughts wandered to the riders. Their eyes, their silence, the grace they'd shown. The baby woke with a small cry that broke the room's stillness. Clara lifted her, pressing her close. Elias watched, not with hunger or need, but with something steadier, humbler. The sight of her rocking that child felt like an answer to a prayer he hadn't dared to make. He rose, stepped outside for a moment. The air was sharp, the sky bright with promise. Snow melted in rivulets down the fence posts. The world smelled new. When he came back in, Clara was humming, a tune so faint it could have been memory. She looked up, and for the first time her eyes held no walls between them. "She'll need a name," she said. Elias nodded. "Then you choose it." Clara glanced at the carved charm on the shelf, then down at the child nestled against her. "Grace," she whispered, "for what we were given." Elias reached out, brushed the baby's tiny hand with his calloused thumb. "Grace Ward," he said softly, testing the sound of a life reborn. Outside, the thaw crept through the valley, loosening the river's ice. Inside, the fire burned slow and steady, not for survival now, but for living. And where silence had once ruled, warmth had taken root, not loud, not fragile, but enduring. Like mercy given a name.